Thank you all for your patience and for hanging out with us. Welcome to Fantasy Literature. I'm Charlotte Moore. I'm directing this. You aren't here for me, so let's just go.
Love you too.
Thanks.
Aww.
Thanks. Aww. This is Faith Hunter.
Woo!
This is Kathryn Hinds. This is some guy we found on the street. I think he likes to be called him. Sorry if you aren't here to talk about the logic of magic, because that's what we're here to talk about. Book nerds? We got book nerds? Okay, magic nerds? Butcher nerds? Lady author nerds? Venn diagram of all of those. So I've obviously informally introduced them, but I would love for you guys to introduce yourselves and just tell us a little bit about what you write and why you're here. Why would I even ask you to be here? What's your deal with magic? What's up with magic in your books? You. Me. I'm looking at you.
Well, I kind of was leaning forward, blocking everybody off. So I realized I kind of should step back. I am Faith Hunter. I write the Jane Yellow Rock series and the Soulwood series. And I offer an apology to my fans if I suddenly bust out in tears. Y'all forgive me. My aunt, Nell Hedgepad, passed away. I was informed last night, and that's the Nell that I wrote the story after. So I'm saying this up front so I can get it out of my system. And so if I suddenly bust into tears, just somebody pass me a tissue, okay?
Okay. Really absolutely, yes.
Kathryn is nurturing as hell.
Thank you. That's good. Thanks, Ray.
Why don't we move on to Kathryn?
Thank you.
Yeah, come back.
Hi, I'm Kathryn Hinds. I don't go anywhere without tissues. And I have a background in writing nonfiction. I have 50-some nonfiction books that have been published. And I said everything I felt I wanted to say in those books. And the next stop, of course, after writing nonfiction was to go totally swing the pendulum the total other way and go to fantasy. So I write, my nonfiction tends to be epic fantasy, and my short fiction and YA fiction tends to be steampunk. So it's this book, this series is very much in the high fantasy magic camp, except the characters who use magic in this book don't actually think they're using magic.
Thaumaturgy? Is that what you're calling it?
Yeah, it's just part of their social fabric.
Hi, I'm Jim Butcher. I'm the author of the Dresden Files, the Codex Alera, and the Cinder Spires. I write I just make stuff up. I am a professional liar. I tell huge, long, complicated lies for a living, and I've got a giant crowd of fact checkers who are waiting to catch me.
What kind of magic do you guys write about? What are you drawn to? What sings to you about magic? Why that even? Why even do that instead of like sci-fi?
Sci-fi isn't selling as well right now.
I always find your honesty really refreshing.
I wrote mystery. Mystery fell through a hole in the ground a few years ago, and I started writing fantasy.
Although I'm married to a scientist and mother of a scientist, I really don't have much of a science brain. And so for me, magic is a lot easier to write. Also, just coming out of my research background, researching so many ancient civilizations and ancient belief systems to write about, it was very much an outgrowth of that in a lot of ways. In addition, I'm a Wiccan priestess, so magic is part of my everyday life. So all of those things kind of, and I should say the other thing is actually coming out of my research background, writing all this nonfiction, social history, I desperately wanted this book to be historical fiction. Because I'm really comfortable with researching. But I had the two characters, I had the situation they were in, and I just couldn't find a historical period or occurrence in which that would happen. So I realized I was going to have to make things up.
Yeah, that's always the danger of research. Facts are the enemy.
Well, and so thinking about you as a witchy priestess, right? So we're talking about magical decay, and now we're also talking about steampunk magic. We're talking about divine magic. So what is? I mean, magic can mean a whole lot of different things. So can you just pick a series, maybe the one that you're closest to, or the one that you write in the most often, and just can you describe a little about what even the magic is in that system, and maybe how it deviates from what people think of as magic typically? Any of you, whoever's feeling it.
Well, in the Dresden Files, magic is, at its core, it's this fundamental energy that's sort of left over from creation. It's ambient in the universe, and everybody can get to it in some fashion or another. Some people are much better at it. The same as like basketball. You know, there are some people who are really good at basketball. And some people are just born with natural gifts, and if they work and apply themselves, then they can become truly great at what they do. So I mean, you don't get so when you're talking about like an actual wizard using magic, that's Michael Jordan. That's who that is. But all kinds of people can get to it and use it, and it's generally fueled by human emotion. And emotions are what you use to get things done with magic. And one of the primary factors about magic is you can't make anything happen with magic that you don't believe can and should happen. So whatever you do with your power, that's in the Dresden Files world, you're telling people who you are with that. That's, you kind of get to see. People can talk a good game, but you really see what's on the line when they start throwing power around, and then you see who they are, and that's one of the things my character gets to run into over and over.
Just as a side note, that reminds me, when we did this panel a few years ago, we had Lev Grossman on it, and magic in his stories his character's sort of like driven by pain, like that's where it comes from, and they're most successful when there's like real shit.
Yeah, it's so dysfunctional. Plus, Lev is the nicest guy in the world.
Oh my God.
He really is.
Yeah, but he's got a lock on that, like drunk orgy magic. So.
Yeah.
Orgy magic?
Yeah.
Drunk orgy.
So this book, The Healer's Choice, comes from two different places. It had a very long gestation, and the first seed of it was planted in 1977. And what happened in 1977? Star Wars came out.
See, that's what I was going to say, but I was sure it was the wrong answer.
Okay, so, and my favorite character was Obi-Wan Kenobi. And I desperately wanted Obi-Wan Kenobi to be a woman. I really wanted female Jedi. And so when The Force Awakens came out, I finally got the movie, the Star Wars movie, that I'd been waiting for since I was a teen. So part of the genesis of the protagonist for this book was my early fantasizing about what if Obi-Wan were female, and what if the Jedi were all female. And then when I think it was my last year in college, I read The Mists of Avalon, which blew me away. I just love that book so much, and it made so much sense to me. At that point, I was planning to become a Methodist minister, and I had my application for seminary half filled out, and I suddenly realized, oh wait, I think maybe I'm kind of not a Christian.
That would have been really awkward.
Yeah.
I think they consider that a handicap towards graduating.
Yeah, I think so. I don't think I would have been ordained, oddly enough. So anyway, But the thing that always bothered me about the Mists of Avalon, and then even more, the books that Marion Zimmer Bradley and Diana Paxson did after that, like Lady of Avalon, was that they worked this extremely powerful magic, but the Britons always lost. So they did this incredible magic, but it never worked, ultimately. So that was one of the other things I got thinking about, well, what if that kind of magic, and if you've read those books, you know the magic is mostly fairly naturalistic. It's not a lot of, it's not like wands and complicated spells. It's drawing on natural energies mainly, right? So I wanted to write books where these people would do these powerful workings and make these incredible sacrifices, and it would actually work. And for me, and I guess this is my personal philosophy in my religious practice as well, magic is done, A, when there's great need, and B, it's done in service to the greater good. And so that personal philosophy spills over into the magic users in the book as well.
When I started out writing fantasy, the magic system in the Rogue Mage world was very much like what Jim was saying, leftover creation energy. It's available to people who can access it. But when I went to the Jane Yellowrock world, which is the world where the Soulwood series is also set, I wanted something very different. What I wanted was sort of quantum mechanic energy. People who can see energy in matter and matter in energy, and can transform by transforming one from the other without setting off an atomic bomb. So my characters, when Jane Yellowrock shifts shape, she can only shift into an animal who is genetically capable of being her mass. Unless she takes mass from somewhere else, where do you get more mass from that doesn't have genetic material in it? So then I began to go, okay, so now we have to bring in rocks into where she could take mass from that doesn't have genetic material in it. So if she becomes a larger animal, she can draw mass, but then she's got to get rid of it. What if she gets rid of too much? Do I leave body parts behind? When she becomes a smaller animal, does she deposit mass? Now, what has she left behind? What if it's
Does
part
she
of
just
her
really
brain?
need to eat like a lot of fiber really fast?
So playing with the logic of the system based on E equals MC squared, based on the law of conservation of mass, and there's another word, my brain's gone. Who said it? Oh well, anyway. Gave, for me, a sort of a logic baseline for my world. And I've tried to keep that baseline of energy and mass together all the way through all of the different types of magic systems, with the exception of my vampires.
So,
Oh, go ahead. I'm done.
Okay,
So, well, they're
vampires.
just different. Yeah, my vampires are different. They have a whole different origination story, and their power comes from, it may still be based on the same quantum mechanic energy stuff, but I haven't figured out how to make that work yet. So I'm talking about it a lot. I haven't talked about that a lot.
It's
So sciencey.
I know. Well, no, this is great. So we're talking about magic realism. We're talking about druid and nature magic and divine magic. And we're talking about science magic. So this is science-based druid magic realism.
Nell is very druid type because all of her energy that she uses comes from the earth. So it is from that which is living below the earth, which is, we haven't discussed yet too much in the series, but she can commune with that, and she can take her magic ability from that.
So how do you, and I want to hear from each of you, how much of this do you plan in advance? How do you sit down? Do you decide in advance, all right, this is sort of the kind of magic that I'm drawn to, these are the parameters of it? Do you make it up as you go along? Does plot inform your magic, or does magic inform your plot? Is it when do you make those decisions in terms of building your world and planning your story? As the spirit moves you.
I'm gonna start start talking in a
It'll
second.
be
You
great
need to
if
call
that
a
happens,
name.
and I'll stop you if you do. That's what I'm here for. Or we can fight to the death. I don't.
I don't want to do that. Don't gang up on me. For me, I sat down and I knew I wanted to write a wizard book, and this was a class project at the time. And so I decided, okay, you know what? I'm going to go out and I'm going to look up. I'm going to go get some books on magic and see what they have to say, which was so helpful in determining something concrete because everyone has exactly the same opinion on magic everywhere you go.
What is in this context? What does a book on magic mean? Is this like is somebody?
Oh, I rolled into my local Borders when we still had Borders, and went to the metaphysics section and grabbed a bunch of different books on magic. Yeah. So I mean, there was a bunch of different. I mean, I grabbed books on Wicca magic, on Chinese geomancy, on fairy-based magic. I mean, there was a bunch of different. I mean, there's all kinds of. The amount of thinking on this is broad and vast.
I know that bookshelf.
Yes. And so then I'm reading it and I'm like,
curious, like if there's a book that tells you how to generate fireballs, like I wanted to know.
well, I'm reading through it and I'm reading through all this stuff and I'm like, nobody knows what's going on. Okay, this just became a buffet. I'm just going to take the stuff that I want, that I think will be cool for telling stories, and so I started grabbing elements from all over the place. And this is what I'm going to use. And I decided that, you know, my wizard was going to be a classical wizard of the White Council, which originally got founded back in Rome and sort of carried the same traditions along the way. And so all the magic is broken out into the 4 elements, a very Roman style. And then I started building from there. You know, after I figured it out, it's like, okay, what can you do with some practical stuff, and what's some fun stuff you can do with magic, and then, you know, how can we have cool action scenes? And so I'm getting all this stuff planned out, but we've also got to put limits on it so that he can't just go and annihilate everyone who gets in his way. And by the time I got done with all of that, you know, it was the next semester already, and I had to start getting to work, and then I just started planning it out, and I don't know that you can plan. I don't know that I did it where the magic was more important than the plot, or the plot was more important than the magic. I knew it all had to work together. And so, I mean, it's just like, okay, I'm going to write a hard-boiled novel with magic in it, let's go. And then got started writing. I didn't really think too much about it until I got to the end of the book. Because I was only writing it because my teacher told me to. I mean, I didn't want to write books about private eye wizards, jeez. Because that's silly. Who would read? Yeah, well, yeah, exactly.
It's not like it's going to get made into a TV show.
Oh God. So I'm doing well. What I was thinking was my teacher, because I was a swords and horses fantasy writer. That's what I was writing. I would write high fantasy, and my teacher kept suggesting to me, hey, maybe you should try some urban fantasy. You keep talking about Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Maybe perhaps you should, and using that as an example, as when we talk about writing stuff in class, perhaps you should try something sort of similar, which is a reasonable suggestion, you know, and to which made me furious. Don't tell me what to do. But being brilliant, I decided because I was 25 and I knew everything at the time. I've gotten dumber as I've gotten older. But yeah, I got in there and said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to show her she's wrong. You know, I'm going to show her she's wrong. I'm just going to do everything she tells me to. I'm going to fill out all her little character sheets, and I'm going to fill out all her little outlines, and I'm going to do all this wooden structured nonsense, and she'll see exactly what kind of cookie cutter pablum crap emerges from such a process. And I wrote the first book of the Dresden. What's that?
What was your teacher's name?
Debbie Chester.
Was your acknowledgement in that book, you know, at the front page, like Debbie Chester?
For my father, who taught me everything I needed to know about living, and for Debbie Chester, who taught me everything I needed to know about writing.
There you go.
I accept that. Well, I came about it from a different direction because I've got 4 years experience in laboratory medicine. So my first thing for magic is medicine, science, what works and what doesn't work in the hospital, and how much is really chemistry and biology, and how much is simply time and letting people heal. And if it's letting people heal, why does that work sometimes better than medicine? And how do they work together? And I did the testing. I would be able to tell the doctor, it's not working, you've got to try something else. Or I would be the one calling and saying, somebody screwed up, this patient's sugar's 800. Or that was my job. And so when I came into looking at the medicine part, I was also looking at 20 years in writing mysteries under the name Gwen Hunter, which is my first name. I'm also Faith Hunter, that's my middle name. So I've always been myself, and I've never been the same person twice. But I pulled the two together. It was the knowledge of medicine and the structure of mystery, which means how often the complications have to get worse. And I've been writing for years. Sold my first book in 1989. So I've been writing for many years by the time I started to write my first fantasy. So I had a lot of plot-based understanding and knowledge already in place. I already kind of had that down, which is why my plots are now so terribly confusing that my editor says, this is a very twisty plot. I think we need, and this is during the outline phase, I need to kind of step back and do a less twisty stuff. And I go, no, I set this up in book 4. You did? Yeah. And when such and such happened, no, I don't remember that. I set this up in book 4, so I had a lot of plot building already there. And the magic came from the laboratory stuff. So that part of writing fantasy came pretty easily to me. Or so I thought, until fans would write and say, yes, but. What about but? But you said on page such and such this, and then on page such and such you said this, and they go, well, crap!
Yes, you did that. But you said on page 10.
I did a lot of that. I go,
We're
okay,
really good at that.
I'm
God,
doing the best
you're
I
so
can.
good.
I've got 14 books in this series coming, so give me a little bit longer. I'll get something right.
Maybe you get some like Cliff Notes with your books or something.
I actually have that is being updated, and the people who have bought the Jane Yellow Rock Companion will in ebook form will have their ebooks automatically updated sometime in the next little bit, and it will have the entire storyline attached to it, and then I will also be releasing my character history, which is already 330 pages, of the Jane Yellow Rock world for free off my website sometime in the next 6 months in my copious spare time. So
Your books are like a Tesla. You know, like people woke up one day and their cars could drive themselves.
So, but I'm doing that for the fans, and so that will be coming out sometime shortly.
Wow.
Do you remember the question?
Not entirely.
Okay. It was sort of how are you planning for magic, and where does it come from, and when do you make those parameters that you're planning for?
Okay, so in The Healer's Choice, as I know this will be shocking, but the protagonist is a healer. And so,
spoilers.
interestingly, I went through a kind of similar thought process as Faith described, because, and again, I had researched and written about all kinds of, social history of the ancient world. So I knew a lot about, not a lot, a fair amount, a reasonable amount about, say, medicine in ancient India, which was much more advanced than medicine in Europe at the same time, and so on. So I was kind of started from this premise that, you can have two cultures at the exact same time, and one of them is much more successful in their medical outcomes. And when you look at medical history, there were people who were theorizing about the causes of disease before we came up with germ theory. And some of those theories were almost to germ theory, and some of them, even though the theory was wrong, the procedures that they went through because of that theory were actually very effective. So, for example, my healers have better outcomes than in than the physicians in the neighboring country, because my healers have part of their whole religious observance has to do with purification. So they actually wash their hands before and after treating patients. But they don't think of that as a medical process. They think of it as a purification. So that was, so the magic goes partly in this book, went partly hand in hand with the world building, and partly was an outgrowth of character, because as I said, my very original first concept of the character was that she was Obi-Wan Kenobi. So, and then what's interesting, okay, the Star Wars people in here, you know the explanation of the Force, life creates it, right? That
Some
that, so in my Wiccan tradition, we work with Welsh lore, and in Welsh lore, there's a word, a novel, and it basically means the kind of ambient life energy that surrounds all living beings. It's the Force. So, you know, so I just kind of ran with that too. I am working on a new book in a different world, and this one, the character always is the very first thing for me, but for this one, the very second thing is the magic system. Because the character this is in an alternate 1750s northeastern, what would become the United States. And the character is an itinerant preacher. And I'm sort of working on this book for my parents, and also to honor my upbringing. And what I wanted was, I wanted to put magic into the place where I grew up, which is the South Shore of Lake Ontario, and into the kind of upbringing I had. So I was thinking, okay, I've got this idea for this preacher, this woman preacher, who, you know, rides from place to place. Now, how do I turn that into a fantasy? And so I like built that magic system before really even getting into the story. So her magic involves, you know, there's certain things that hymns can accomplish. Singing a hymn is a magical operation, and she can do. So it takes like things that are kind of typical of early American religious experience, but magicifies them.
If there's so much that magic can be used to do in a story, if magic can potentially do anything, what shouldn't magic do in terms of your plot or your character? When is it an overstep, and how do you draw those boundaries?
Bringing people back from the dead is always a bad idea.
Oh, yeah.
Can't bring anyone back.
Unless we're talking about Jon Snow.
Oh.
Can't make anyone fall in love with you.
Yeah, and those are there are like these universal rules like that you understand. I mean, of course, if you're writing the book, you can do whatever you want. You can make people fall in love with you. That's a decision that you make, right? But then what's to stop other than your own decision from a protagonist of just doing that? So like, when does it become that your character's overpowered, basically?
I have a witch council, and they have null rooms, and they stick the witch characters who abuse their power into a null room after a trial, and that person doesn't get out until they've learned their lesson, which usually means never.
Well, and by that, I guess what I'm asking is not even in terms of the world, but like, have you? I'm sure we've all sort of read a fantasy story where you just kind of go, oh, come on, like the characters now, like sort of Mary Stu type, or Gary Stu, Mary Stu type, where, you know, magic just lets them do whatever they want. Like, what's even the point of having a plot or character or barriers?
I don't read books like that.
By accident.
Really, not many people read books like that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
I just
But-
close it.
Yeah.
I mean, because if your character is that powerful, you can't raise the stakes for them, because they can get out of anything. So where's your story? There's no nothing for them to work against or work for if they can just, twitch their nose and everything is okay again.
I think a key to dealing with the issue of power creep, especially in a long story, Scalzi had something good to say in Old Man's War, where he was talking about soldiers going off to war and how in the history of mankind, soldiers have never gone off to war with everything they wanted to fight the war with. They get sent off with what they need, or probably a little less than they need, and then they have to make do, and that's what soldiers have to do. And it's sort of the same thing. I mean, you can have your character get more powerful as long as whoever he's going up against is also scaling up with him, so that there's still the chance that he's going to get swatted around. Essentially, it's a fish pond ratio that you've got to pay attention to. So if you're the big fish in the pond, you're not going to have a very exciting story. If you're the little fish in the pond, you're not going to be able to make enough happen to change the story maybe. So you've got to find that sweet spot where you're the medium-sized fish who has to be smarter and faster than the bigger fish, but is still bigger and stronger than the little fish.
I also think, as in non-magical life, no one person can do everything. So I like to have my characters have specializations. So in this book, there are these 4 orders of women who can work with power, but each of them, the power manifests for different purposes, for healing, or for fighting, or for looking into the future and things like that. So no one person can do all of it. In the book I've talked about that I'm working on now, some preachers can, specialize in rural, agricultural prayers and hymns. So they help the farmers, they preach to the farmers, they help the crops grow. Other preachers are sea preachers, and they, work with the fishermen and the sailors. And so, and my preacher is a farm preacher, and her whole issue is that in the book is that she gets called on to go to sea, and she's totally, pardon the pun, out of her depth.
Yeah, I was going to say she's completely at sea.
Yeah.
Oh.
And by the way, we're a little over the half-hour mark now. Do you want to start taking audience questions in a minute? So just be thinking of those. And I know a lot of folks are here to see Jim Butcher, but we have 3 really smart people up here. So if you've got like general magic type questions or writing type questions, I'm going to maybe take those first. While you noodle that, I'm going to throw out some really softball questions. I just want you to answer from your gut. I'm going to start with Jim. Flight or invisibility?
Flight.
Kathryn. Flight or invisibility?
Flight.
Flight.
Flight, because to truly be invisible, I think I'd have to run around naked, and I'm just not doing that.
I would have picked you for invisibility, but why flight? Why did you go with flight?
Because I'm living in Denver and the traffic is not very good.
Why did you go with flight?
Because I was picturing the DragonCon crowds and thinking how much easier it would be to navigate.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I answered
You
mine.
answered yours already. Okay, and then one other one. Firebolts or lightning bolts?
Lightning,
Lightning bolts. Why lightning bolts?
because Thor.
Because Thor, nice.
God, you're wrong. Fireball because Dungeons and Dragons.
Fireball, because at the end of the world, somebody's going to have to be able to make fire.
Yes.
Okay, and this is like, I mean, it's not magic, but it's magic. Telepathy or telekinesis?
Oh.
Telekinesis.
Okay,
Wait, is it send, receive telepathy, or
Yes.
send on? Okay, send, receive. Telekinesis.
So ostensibly, you're able to control it, right? You're not just walking down the street and you're like, oh god!
Yeah,
Masochistic.
I've been around this planet too long.
Yeah, this is your superpower, so you can control your superpower. So telepathy or telekinesis.
I don't want either one.
You must choose. You must choose. You can move stuff with your mind, or you can
I'll
freak
go
out drivers in front of you. Okay, telekinesis.
And my reason for telekinesis is that I'm less than 5 feet tall. And there's not always someone around to reach things down.
And I tend to fall down steps a lot because I'm quite clumsy, and if I had telekinesis, I could catch myself before I hit bottom.
I
Nice.
do like a cool like head flip.
Yeah, I would look so cool.
For me, it's telekinesis, just because I had to default to that from telepathy, because I'm like, when I'm not playing a famous person at a con, I'm actually kind of a fairly serious introvert, and people are awful. and really, if I don't have some alone time, people are awful. After I've had my alone time, then they're humans. But having the telepathy and being closer and understanding more people, terrifying.
All right. So can I see hands for questions? Okay, so you first.
Quick question about the convert. You was talking about your character doing the mass conversion and all that. Has she ever considered being a spokesperson for, say, Weight Watchers? how would they react to the real world? Wait, we don't have to sell a program. She sheds 20 pounds automatically.
She's not human. she can interbreed with her type can interbreed with humans, but she's not human, and it's a genetic-based ability, so not been a problem.
It's not a skill that she's going to share
Nice.
with others. Or to be able to share. Okay. Yes, Nant.
Hi. So it's important. The necessity of rules in Magic is important for storytelling and all that other stuff. At what point do you break those rules, and at what points do you allow external influences to allow exceptional circumstances?
Damn it! I wrote that down and you asked it first.
Yes.
The cost for me, the cost has to be higher. If they have to break the rules that I've already set up, the cost has to be really, really high. It has to be facing death head on high, and maybe left with death afterwards. So the cost has to be worth it, and so far it hasn't been, but I'm getting there in the next books.
Whoa.
I think, at least in the Dresden Files, the rules don't get broken because they're like the rules of physics. You know, you cannot break the laws of physics. And I'm even wearing the shirt for it. And but there's a lot of points at which it looks like someone's broken the rules, and that's part of the plot of digging into it, of how is this happening. Also, the rules are different for different groups of folk. So if you're a human wizard, magic works a certain way, because magic, the way you interface with the magical energy is through your emotions. That tends to mean that the magical energy around you is really volatile, because emotions are not something that you just hang out calmly, except for calm, I suppose. But because of that, there's all this interference and inefficiency with converting the ambient energy into other kinds of energy for what you want to use. And the result of that is that's why electronics go haywire when wizards are around, because they're messing with EM around them all the time. They don't even realize they're doing it. But if you go over to one of the Fae, and the Fae is using magic, the Fae will sit down and play Nintendo. They have no problem with that, because they're not interfacing with magic through their emotions. They just do it because it's part of them. And when you get to other, so different things can use magic for different stuff because they don't have the same interaction with it. So they can break rules, at least rules for humans. But on the other hand, humans can do stuff that the Fae can't do. So
loophole abuse.
Yeah, loophole abuse, a lot of it. Yeah.
You're playing under a different set of rules.
Yeah, well, I started with first edition D&D, and that was the loophole system from heaven. So we're just going to start a party of rangers.
Yes, blue shirt. Yep, right there.
So my question is, you were talking about how humans draw their magic from emotions. Could do you feel like that to a certain extent takes away from the logical aspect of it, since emotions and belief are by their very nature illogical and irrational?
The question for those of you who didn't hear it was, if you're basing your magical system off of emotions, isn't it sort of contradictory to have a logical system apply to a non-logical system like emotions? Since emotions are volatile and logic makes sense. How do you square those? Right?
But good. I don't have to. Nobody
Yeah.
else has bothered to square their emotion logic problem. I mean, just as human beings, you know, we are creatures of emotion. Everybody likes to think that they're logical, but you aren't. You probably aren't. People who are genuinely really logical, we look at them and go, man, what's wrong with them? Oh, we're going to call those sociopaths. Yeah, exactly.
Or Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah, but even Vulcans.
Yeah, that's like overcompensating.
Yeah,
The fact
yeah.
that they're just screaming inside all the
But
time.
yeah, I mean, there's an inherent conflict in that, but it's not a big one, because the rules of magic are still the rules of magic, and I mean, that's the universe. It exists independently of all the people who are around. People can thrash around and be unemotional, but the universe is going to go ahead and be the universe regardless of what you feel like. So, I mean, it's not really I don't see it as a conflict at all. I guess maybe if it is, I just am not aware of it. But yeah, but people are not logical creatures at all. So.
Yeah, though to them, I mean, maybe it's fair to say that when you have an emotion like that, that's usually a response to something else, and that makes sense to you in that moment. Whether it makes sense to everyone else is another thing, but nobody really does anything without.
I am made furious by that comment.
Seems
Feel
reasonable to
justified,
me.
and I am justified to feel that way.
Now we're fighting. Yeah.
So in a post-Borders bookstore world, people are looking to write their own magic rules but not wanting to copy others. What advice?
Where do we get the books on fireballs? Which books on fireballs can you recommend?
I think if you want to not copy somebody else, you actually have to read everybody else first. So you have to do a lot of reading and a lot of thinking, and then you have to be aware that there's nothing new. There really is nothing new. It doesn't matter what you do, you're still going to be copying somebody else.
Yeah.
It might be just a word here, it might be a word there, but you have to put your own twist on it. You have to find what inside of you is really strange. I'm a really strange person. Yeah, so I go inside of me to find what is different from all of, yeah, I look for my inner weird. I go inside me to find what's different when I'm coming up with a new world system and a new magic system. And there's nothing different. I still have witches, I still have vampires, I still have all of earth magic, I still have all of the things that are similar, but I have all the things that are different too. So I have a lot of Cherokee wisdom and magic in all of my books because I'm part Cherokee and didn't know how much. Part Cherokee, and I've done a lot of study into their magic, and so I've brought a lot of that out into it. And find what's different for you. Who bring out your own inner weird.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Oh, I was just going to say, don't worry about copying other people too much, because as Faith said, yeah, it's all been done before anyway. Look, if you put two cooks in a kitchen and they're identical kitchens, and you say, okay, we're going to make a dish like this, go, you're still going to get a dish that's different from each kitchen, because the cooks are different people and they've learned thousands of different things, and people are so varied and incredibly unique. That even if you said, you know what, I'm going to write a Dresden Files knockoff, and you set out to start writing a Dresden Files knockoff, you would still come up with a story that was different than mine, because you're a different person than me. I mean, you'll have your own things that you think are important, your own things that you are going to want to bring out about people in the story. You're going to find out things about yourself that are different and unique than the things I found out about myself when I was writing. So try not to worry about that too much. Don't let that be foremost in your thinking. I mean, if you find yourself completely duplicating the end battle scene of Star Wars or something, then maybe it's time to rethink a little. But at the same time, I don't think you'll run into that problem. Just go do your own stuff.
It does seem reasonable to say that if you're going to use a magic system from a particular culture that is not yours, maybe consider not doing that And or B, if you are going to do that, just research the hell out of it and talk to some people from that culture.
Absolutely.
But otherwise, it sounds like what I'm hearing is the magic was inside you all along.
Oh. Wow. Great professional summarized into a cliche.
All right, holy cow, that's a lot of hands. Okay, in the back.
So you have a magical system in your mind, you have rules. How do you introduce it to the reader, like weave it into the story instead of like dropping a glossary on them?
I mean, some people do have that.
Yeah.
How do you write a book that's not all exposition, basically, about how the like? How do you introduce the magic into your? Is it you start? I mean, this is going to vary for each one of you. Is it just little elements at once? Does the book open with a flash from the sky? Like, how do you? Sometimes people don't even know they're reading a book about magic until they get halfway through.
You never read a book about magic. There's no such thing as a book about magic. There's a book about characters, and there's books about conflict, and there's should be books about character and conflict. So if you're writing exposition, you're not writing a book. You're telling us something that you know. There's a difference. Get inside your character's point of view, create conflict, then you have a book.
Yeah,
Show
just
it, don't tell it.
show it, don't tell it. Yeah, I mean, you show it in operation. You know, if you're going to start off with a book, you're going to start writing magic. You got to show people doing magic and it making sense and it being something real in their world that they live with and deal with all the time.
It's like at the beginning of The Hobbit, Tolkien doesn't, open up with telling us what hobbits are and where they fit into the whole cosmology of Middle-earth. He just starts out with there was a hobbit hole and it was not a nasty hole and he just gradually unveils this world to you. I think with both research and world building, which includes things like the rules of your magical system, if you have them, which I don't. But I guess we all have, if it's not set down as rules, a sense of idea of how our system works. But things like that you reveal to the reader strictly on a need-to-know basis. And if it's not something that your viewpoint character would be thinking about at that time, then don't spell it out for your reader. Because your viewpoint character is not going to sit there and say, oh yes, I remember when I was first trained in this ritual and it goes like this and you have to stack the little cubes on top of each other, alternating the colors, and if you're I'm thinking about A Song of Ice and Fire and how magic in that isn't. I don't know that the M word has ever even been dropped in those books. Like things happen and then other things happen as a result of that. Melisandre looks in the flames and they are not described, she looks in them and she goes, okay, I get that, but we don't see any of that a lot of the time. It's just a facet of the world that makes sense to them.
Yeah, you're right, they never say magic. It's like The Walking Dead never saying zombie.
Song of Ice and Fire doesn't use that word.
Let's see, I want to pick a woman. Go.
Okay, Larry Correia is putting together a stories based in his Monster Hunter International universe. How would each of your characters fare in this universe? Would they work with the Monster Hunters, or would they be hunted by the Monster Hunters?
Oh God, Harry would be worth so much puff. Hey, he'd never get to walk because one of the slimy Monster Hunter organizations would definitely go after him just for the money. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm afraid I'm not familiar with that universe, so I cannot answer, sorry.
And I have a story in it, so you'll have to
Yeah, me too.
Okay.
Let's see. Yes, way in the back.
You touched briefly on the abuse of power. Jim's got the wardens. Touched briefly on the abuse of power. Jim's got the wardens. You mentioned null cells. Both of them are pretty cut and dry, black and white. You screw up, bad things are going to happen.
So you're asking, what are the consequences for bad behavior in your respective worlds?
You know, I have to say, that's something I haven't really thought of, which I now need to, obviously. Because my characters are they're very united at this point in a struggle for the continued existence of their country and their way of life. But so the closest thing I've had happen is that one character suggests to another that she might, not treat the woman in charge who's very ill and let her die so someone else can take over. And then the healer accuses her of ambition, which is because they're a very communitarian society, so you're supposed to think of, the way they're strictly trained to think always of the common good and never of themselves. So I guess actually my mechanism is thus far, when it comes up that someone really does behave badly, then we'll figure out what to do with them. I'm a pantser. I don't figure stuff out until it happens, until the characters start doing it. But they have safeguards in that they are really, really strictly trained from a young age, intensely disciplined. So they have internalized very much these certain norms of behavior. I mean, for example, when they reach a certain level in their order, they have to actually give up their personal name and be known only by a title. So they're supposed to relinquish their individuality and just function as for the good of the people. And therein lies some conflict for our protagonist.
We've got a couple of minutes left, so I'm just going to take a couple more questions and we're going to do door prizes. Yes, Minion.
My question has two different points.
Can you answer it? Can you ask me quickly?
Yes.
Okay, do it.
It's all in one.
Okay.
Would you consider writing a series which contains more than one magic system? And what are the consequences of them interacting?
So the question is, would you consider writing a series with more than one magic system, and what might be the consequences of two magic systems interacting? I don't know quite what that means, but I hope they can.
Would you consider writing a Brandon Sanderson book?
Oh, right.
And then over here they run into a civilization that they haven't before, and these people have superhuman understanding of quantum mechanics and control magic that way. What happens when those people meet?
Druids versus physicists.
That sounds like a great book.
Yeah, let me see a physicist change into a bear. No. Physicist's going to look at that and he's going to be going, that's just not possible. There's no way the mass ratio to... All right, that was a cheap joke. I'm sorry.
You're forgiven.
Screaming bears is the answer.
Yeah.
Bears. Screaming nerd bears?
No, I already did that in Alera. The Alera books it was the Lost Roman Legion wound up in the land of the Pokemon and started using them. That's kind of the basic theme of the Alera books. But there's all these other races on the planet that also have their own stuff that they get involved with. The Kanem have got some kind of ninja style magic that they use that you see their hunters using. The Marat are a civilization that bonds on a mental level with a totem animal, and so they function that way. And because it was the Romans, they met and fought. Romans were good at that. They were really good at that. But it's I tell you what though, it's so fun to play with that because you have characters coming at things from such different perspectives that especially when you've got to make them work together, that is the most awesome thing to write. It is a good time.
Okay, I'm going to do one more question. Quick questions. Quick questions, yes.
Have you guys ever, you've written these books, especially over long series, and you've set up these laws, and then you find yourself, 7 or 8 books in, you've managed to write yourself into a corner. by the laws of your magic, the only way I can think to get you out of this situation breaks the rules. What happened and how did you get out of it?
Obviously, that's never happened to any of
My books tend to be revelatory, meaning that the magic system is revealed throughout the book. So that doesn't generally happen. My characters can learn new things within their own systems to get them through. So it's called character development, and I use it from a magic systems too. So that gives the reader the additional benefit of learning the magic system as well as seeing how the character develops with it. That's just the way I do it.
Yeah, there's no such thing as a plot problem. There's only plot opportunities because there's something cool there that you could do that you haven't seen yet. That's what, when you run into that, that's what's happening. And it took me a long time to learn that.
Thanks, guys. That was good.
Yeah.
I guess we're done.